Okay, pot melts. Well, I started off with, this is a Slumpy's mini melt kit. Got your bowl and then your 8-inch support ring. And I've done all sorts of experiments on this. And as you can see, there's all sorts of, I've just thrown all sorts of different colored glass in here, which technically you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to try to keep the colors the same. So if you have a pot melt, if you have a pot where you put red, green, and blue, you should always use this for pot melts that have red, green, and blue in it. You know, so when you kind of put them in the same spot or the same locale. And if you change color, you may, you know, it's supposed to, if you're going to have a dark blue in your melt, and you would basically transition to a light blue, and eventually, in theory, you can shift colors completely from what you originally put in here, but that's making the assumption your bowl is going to live that long, and I have abused this thing beyond reason. And I don't know if you can see the bottom of this thing here, but after about 6-7 firings, this thing is about ready to give up the ghost. I don't know if you can see the cracks in here. You got a crack right there, right there. So this thing's history. Now a couple of, and it's cool. Pot melts are cool, and just like bow ties are cool. Here's one that I did using the Slumpy's 8-inch mini melt. So this is one of the first ones I did, and I had the pigtail on here, and I did a full fuse, and it spread out a little bit more. It's like this is spread out to about 8.5 inches. So the problem with this mini melt system is that it's kind of a one-trick pony, and the bowl that goes with the mini melt system, well, it looks like there's just actually one bowl that goes for it. This is kind of meant to give you an introduction to pot melts, but you've got other pot melt equipment there available at Slumpy's, but it's not necessarily designed for a shallow kiln. I have a Fusion 16 kiln, and you can probably hear it going off in the background. It's annealing right now. Anyway, so this 8-inch mini melt will just fit inside. And the first couple of times I had took out my kiln shelf and just threw an 8-inch fiberboard down the bottom of my kiln and put this on top. That kind of made me a little bit nervous, you know. So I found that I can actually put my normal shelf, just lay it flat down on the bottom of the kiln. It's like 5/8 of an inch, and this is 5.5 inches, so leaves me about 1/4 inch clearance from the top. 1/4 inch clearance from the top of the lid. It gives me about, let me see, this is 5.5. Let me do the math. I'm having problems doing math right now. Okay, this is 5.5 inches tall, okay, and my kiln shelf is, let me see, 5.5 plus 5/8, be 6 1/4. Okay, from the floor of my kiln to the bottom of the lid is 6.5 inches. So I've got about a 3/8 inch clearance between the top of this and the roof of my kiln. So I felt more comfortable using the kiln shelf than the fiberboard. I probably could have bought 1/4 inch, but it actually ends up starting to add up after a while. So and I'm able to get just as good results. I just got to be careful. If you're in a similar situation, you have a smaller kiln, a shallower kiln, that when you put your glass in, you don't pile it above the lip of your bowl, you know, so you don't want it touching your lid, and you don't want to touch the heating elements, of course, either. So that may mean chopping up the glass into shorter pieces and filling it up. But anyway, yeah, this thing is toast, ready to be thrown out. And I also mixed too many colors of glass in here, so with each subsequent experiment that I did, each subsequent pot melt, the colors, the pot melts just ended up getting muddier and muddier no matter what I did. So they say that you're not supposed to, you're supposed to keep a separate bowl for each color set that you use. They're not kidding. So because let me show you one melt that I did. As you can see, compared to this one, much darker. And maybe because I think I used a little bit more blue in here too, so that's probably that's why. But and this last one here just did not come out that terribly well. So and by the time I finally did this one, this bowl here was showing signs of cracking. So I decided to go ahead and pursue something else, an alternative. Now, you can buy a pot melt system from Delphi Glass that will work. It looks like it'll work fine in a shallower kiln. And they've got all sorts of different kinds of bowls. You've got obviously bowls with multiple holes around, or slits in it in different angles, different positions. They give you different patterns and stuff like that. The problem is, if you want to do, really get into pot melts, you got to buy a lot of bowls, and they start to add up. And I was trying to do the math and thinking about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to try. The cost of the bowls and the fact that they may not last more than 6 or 7 firings kind of gave me some pause. So I was trying to figure out what else I'm going to do. And obviously another thing to do is just go with the flower pot method. And the problem with that is my kiln is shallow, only 6.5 inches, and I don't have the bucks right now to buy a bigger one, or the space either. My little work area here is, believe it or not, 32 square feet, including the kiln, which is off to the right of me. And it's kind of nice having it this close because I've got a basement window in front of me, and this is an older house, so it lets in quite a bit of cool air, and this kiln kind of keeps it nice and toasty here during the winter. And I got some vents to vent the heat out during the summer, but anyway, so yeah, I figured out what my alternative is. Because to buy all the bowls that I want to try with all the different patterns, good grief, it can run into the hundreds of dollars. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. Obviously, one of the ways of doing it is using a flower pot. Again, the problem is, in order to get what I understand from what I've read, to get decent patterns, you need to get some height from the bottom of your bowl to the to your base. You got to have the glass drop 3 or 4 inches or something like that. Or you'd be elevated about 3 or 4 inches to get some decent patterns and stuff like that. Maybe it's possible to do it from lower down, but yeah, like I say, the problem with flower pots is that they're too tall, and if you want to make a pot melt that's of decent size, 8 to 10 inches, you need a bigger flower pot that's taller. And I think that I finally figured what I would end up doing is buying these bigger flower pots and then chopping about half of them off, half to 2/3 of it, and just leaving the bottom, 2 inches of this flower pot. And I just thought, if I buy bigger, of course it would force me to buy a bigger flower pot to get more volume of glass, which essentially I'd probably be spending $7 to $10 on a flower pot and basically throwing away 2/3 of it. And I just thought that's kind of nuts. And the other thought I had was, so I thought, why not, instead of a pot, use a flower pot saucer that the flower pot sets in.